in each one of our lives, independently of our culture, independently of our life experiences that we've had, where we live, who we are, etc., independently of whether we're a human being or not. There are two main energies, two main strengths, this energy of attraction and of aversion. And it's attraction to being well, to well-being, and it's the aversion to suffering. No one, I've never seen or heard about anyone who has attracted to suffering. We can be attracted to situations or things that generate suffering, but at the moment, at that moment, it attracts us. But we're not attracted to suffering. And I've never seen anyone who doesn't have attraction to happiness. There can be different levels, like on a physical level, physical well-being, or projecting our happiness onto material things, or anything like that. These two strengths, these two forces, energies of attraction to pleasure and happiness, and this aversion to suffering, are the two main energies that guide us in life. If we were to ask ourselves, why are we here now? We could give 1,000 different explanations, philosophical and spiritual, any kind of explanation. But deeply, when we get to the point, we see that there's a part of attraction to well-being, and aversion to suffering. It's this same energy that after it manifests and grows along the spiritual practice, and then expands out towards others. So that same attraction that I have towards happiness, when it's no longer only my own, but also towards others, we say that this is the development of altruistic love. When there's aversion to suffering, which is not only my own, but it also includes the others, that's the development of compassion. So these two energies are always present. It's based on this. There are two concepts that go beyond concepts, but they're very, very important in our lives. They're important along the path, as explained by Buddha and the so-called Buddhism. But unfortunately, in our culture, in our context, we don't have these words, and when there's not a word to say something in a language, it means that concept is missing in that culture. I joke a little bit that in Italian the word privacy doesn't exist, and it's something that, like, in the Italian culture, it's just missing. But we can give 1,000 different examples. But beyond this, when we take a philosophy, a life philosophy, or a vision of a worldview, like the one that Buddha transmitted, that then developed for centuries and centuries, and then we bring it in a very different context, like the one in which we find ourselves, the concepts that we have are not always enough. And this is what the great difficulty in translating, and the greatest difficulties in translating is when we have words in one language, but in the other language, that concept doesn't exist. So the main difficulty is when there's a word that we then that we don't have the concept for, and we find this in many things. If someone tries to translate from Italian into Tibetan, for example, there are words I mean, we're in the concept in Tibetan doesn't exist, and it becomes difficult then to translate. And in the world view, the Buddhist worldview, there are two fundamental concepts that are strongly connected to this aversion and attraction that are missing in our language. Not just Italian, but it doesn't exist in Portuguese or Spanish or English, in none, I don't think, in any of our Western languages. And the concepts are these two, these following two. I want to be happy. I have attraction towards happiness, towards well-being, and I have aversion towards suffering. What do I need to do to be happy? What do I need to do to avoid suffering? That which is a cause for happiness is called punja in Sanskrit. In Tibetan, sonam. What is a cause for suffering is called papam or dikpa. Said papam in Sanskrit and dikpa in Tibetan. And I was looking for the best words to translate this at the beginning when we dikpa, these causes of suffering was translated as sin. But it's a word that even if at the origin it means error, but it doesn't correspond so well to that meaning. And it reflects, and on the positive side, that we use the word merit is used, and even that is heavily loaded too, because it seems like someone needs to prize you if you are meritorious or not. So instead, I found two words that I think can work, even if they don't work perfectly, because they're used in different contexts, and I use the word credit and debt. Because the concept of cause and effect is that I make an action today, and the result I'm not going to experience in the immediate. I'm going to experience it further along. It's a little bit like when we talk about our body. If I eat something badly, I'm not going to feel that effect immediately. Maybe at the moment I like it and there's pleasure, but over time, eating badly is going to bring me some kind of illness. So I've created a debt towards my body little by little. Then one day I'll have to pay, and that manifests in sickness and illness. On the other hand, if I follow another kind of diet that might be tiresome in the present time, but then over time it will bring me better health, etc., etc. So an important point is that when we talk about punya, papam, sonam, and dikpa, these causes of positive or negative actions, the results are not immediate. It's something that is done that adds up with other actions and gradually brings us a result. And when we think about this concept of credit and debt, even if karma, the idea of karma goes way beyond good credit and debit. But the concept is similar. I do something that generates a kind of energy, and then after it's going to bring a kind of result. Another idea that helps us understand this concept is the idea of inertia. If I take an object and I throw it, once I've thrown that object, I take a stone or a stick. When I open up my hand, the action of throwing has finished, but the object keeps going. There's an energy, an inertia that propels the object forwards, and at a certain point, that object comes into contact with something, and with that impact, that action transforms into something else. When we do an action, that action is finished, but there's this inertia of that action that continues until it meets another situation that we call condition that is going to then bring a certain type of result. So now I don't want to get into too many details into all this, but all of this just to say, also because if we get into the details on the law of karma, then we're going to spend all morning and afternoon as well. But the main point is there are two main energies in our lives, and this attraction and aversion, for two, let's call them objectives, to avoid suffering and be happy. I mean, this is what is at the basis of all of our actions. And if we looked at each one of us in our society and in the world in general, I mean, we all want these two things: to avoid suffering and obtain happiness are two manifestations of the same. And it's incredible to see that at the end of the day, we have we have visions that can be absolutely opposing, but we all want the same thing. So the question is how do we get these things? One of the fundamental points in Buddhism is to avoid suffering and to reach a state of well-being and happiness. It's not enough to do what um, it, it's not enough to do what brings us pleasure and happiness at the moment and helps us avoid suffering at the moment. Using the metaphor from before, just to be well doesn't mean it's not about just eating chocolate all the time. And when I have a headache, I just take an aspirin. We can't cure just the symptom. We need to avoid behavior that generate on a mid and long term suffering, and we need to cultivate on mid and long term behaviors that bring us well-being. It's the same thing in a relationship between two people, regardless of the context, with familial, between your children and their parents, or friends at work, or within a couple. If I want to have a certain type of relationship with someone, I need to cultivate it daily. And over time, friendship, affection, and trust is developed. Instead, if I react always to the present moment because it's easier, I'm often going to cultivate over time distrust and aversion, etc. That then it becomes difficult then to change. So in this present moment, I shouldn't react to what's happening, but I should build my future. And in front of this, there's an action that is often repeated in the teachings, which is called in Tibetan Gyawasampap, which is accumulate. I know we don't have the word. Often it's translated as accumulating merits, accumulating credits, generating this inertia, these positive energies, inertias, by doing actions that over time will bring us to experience more happiness, and to avoid actions that over time will bring us suffering. These, in Tibetan, it's called Tsoksak Drichang. It's in many contexts it's repeated. It means to accumulate that which will then generate happiness and well-being, even if maybe at that present moment it's not necessarily pleasurable, but it's taking us in that direction, and eliminate this negative conditioning that brings us to experience suffering. So it means to have a vision mid and long term, and not be stuck in reactions in the present time. And in front of this, we can ask ourselves, okay, well, I want to do positive actions, compute positive actions, uh, actions that generate causes to be well. Also because it's said very clearly, and I have for based on trust and also on logic, there are no results without causes. Everything that we experience is the result of a very complex relationship among many parts. So if I want to experience a state of peace, of well-being, of satisfaction, of balance, of inner balance, I need to create causes and also the conditions. Sometimes we confuse thinking that the causes are only our emotions. But taking care of our emotional state is very important, but that has to do with mostly with our conditions. Because not getting upset or being able to thank and develop gratitude, to act with generosity, to diminish anxiety, to manage anxiety better. This is very important. And they're both conditions and causes for the future. But in the present moment, when we're doing it, it's a condition through which the causes that we've created in the past, they can manifest. And in this, what determines, what are the actions that we can define as virtuous, as positive actions, as causes that are going to generate later a sensation, a feeling of well-being and happiness. In other words, how can I get these credits for happiness? And there are mainly two ways that are connected to the root of what we were talking about before. If I do an action that is going to avoid suffering in someone, if I help someone suffer less or avoid suffering completely, like someone is hungry and I give that person food, that person has pain, a person or an animal or any living being, if I can help eliminate that pain, I'm avoiding suffering. If I help someone who's sick, I help someone, or I listen to someone who has a lot of anxiety or sadness, and by doing that, I can help someone pacify their body and mind. If I help someone see reality in a different way and act in a way that will generate less suffering for himself or herself. Anything that we can do that is going to avoid suffering, diminish suffering in another, is a form of a positive action, regardless of how. I was thinking the other day, maybe a little ladybug falls into a bottle, and then you save the bug. But maybe we as human beings, we think we're so superior, and we think we're so superior to little bugs. Instead, you see, a small insect that's stuck. You really you imagine how we would feel if we were stuck in a bottle. So we're helping someone avoid suffering. We're giving value to life. There's so many ways that suffering manifests itself, and we can help diminish that suffering for others. Another important way, because very often we think that the positive actions somehow have to do with like religious activities and those who are weaker or those who are suffering, which is fine. But there's another side. To do positive actions, And they can also just generate joy and well-being. I mean, on one hand, we can do something that can diminish or avoid suffering in someone else. On the other hand, we can do actions that actually increase the happiness and joy and the well-being in someone else. So these are the two main actions. When we talk about both of these, there are different levels. I can I can help you suffer less because you're very hungry and I give you something to eat. But maybe I give you something that maybe even mid and long term is going to be harmful to you, or I can help you. I can help you learn how to maintain your health and follow a better diet to help you avoid suffering mid and long term. The more we're able to do actions that have deeper a deeper influence on a mid and long term, the stronger that action is. The more superficial and immediate is, that action is less strong. It's not as strong because it brings fewer results, fewer beneficial results. If we were to ask ourselves, what are positive actions, that will generate positivity and this merits, it's sonam in Tibetan. They're all actions that directly or indirectly, because sometimes it's not immediate, but either mid and long term they bring positive action. So we can call them we can call them indirectly. So they generate happiness, well-being. So this should be done with the awareness and the intention of doing so. So all actions done with love, where there is intention for the other to be well, for the other to be happy, and has a certain coherence in that way. In Portuguese, we have a saying that says, so the hell in English would be the road to hell is paved with good intentions. But if, you know, it's very necessary to have this intention of love and compassion, but together with that, we also need awareness, discernment, and a little wisdom that needs to go together. So when we're able to do something that's based on love, where we want the happiness of someone else, and and we do something to generate this positivity, or through compassion, which means I don't want someone to suffer, so then I do something to help that person avoid the suffering. These are the main two. If we look from the point of view, like on a more subtle point of view, we can say, even our spiritual practice, to develop more balance, more satisfaction, more joy, to be able to diminish arrogance and anger, etc. These are all they're ways that we do to be able to interact better with others. And so this is also a virtuous action, because I'm doing something that mid and long term is going to bring more well-being, even with those that I interact with. I mean, how can I help people if I can help people be more balanced? If I'm completely neurotic and imbalanced, first I need to have my own stability. How can I give you food if I myself don't have food? First I need to obtain to be able to give. So when our spiritual practice, our path of growth is done, hopefully mostly made up of the intention of love and compassion, that gives a tremendous amount of direction and strength to be able to generate positive energy. the point that I wanted to bring today mostly is that in many contexts in the teachings they remind us that generating this positive energy, accumulating these so-called merits. I've never found this right, the right word, but create these credits, these so-called credits, with awareness every day should be a part of the day. There should be this strength to generate these causes with awareness, for our stability, for our happiness. And so often I see that sometimes I see that this is hard, because if I need to do something because I need to generate so-called merits, it seems like the motivation is not pure. It seems that I do this because I want something else, but that's not the point. The point is that in our daily lives we're extremely taken by the survival of our daily life. We have this tendency, a very strong tendency, to react instead of acting with awareness. We have got our appointments during the week, during the day. We know that we need to do this, that, and the other. We try to act the best way possible, to act with coherence with others, and that's wonderful, everything we do. But very often, the day turns around, are the things we have to do. And somehow we get into this mechanism of reacting. It's clear that within that, having awareness of how we're going to act, observing our mind, our behavior, redirect our mind, our body, speech, and mind, conduct, and this is very good. But beyond this, it's important to act in a way that's going to generate positive energy with awareness. So choose with awareness to do something every day. Like today, for example, I want to help this person who needs help. I want to avoid that suffering. I need to do actions with awareness, knowing that that I'm generating those causes, because I personally want to reach a state of peace and I want to help others do the same. So I need to create the causes. Because an inner state of peace, an inner state of satisfaction, of well-being, requires a very strong quantity of so-called merits. How often have we experienced states of peace or joy? Many, many times. But does it stay, or after a while does it fade away? Because of habits, but also because of this lack of causes, for the lack of these so-called merits. I've seen this many times. There's a way in Tibetan to say it. It says, when someone has all the conditions in life to be happy, but is not able to say, materially is missing nothing, receives a lot of affection, has everything that one would need to be fine, but is still not able, or when it happens that where there's a marvelous time, but that person is still not able to enjoy it. And here opens I have a theory, which I'm not going to get into for a question of time, but in my theory, just briefly, when we open up a certain karmic cycle, when we access certain actions that we have computed in the past and are manifesting now, we start experiencing these results. And so there are times in our lives where we have a certain amount of a certain amount of suffering, and you can change context. You can take this away, add this, but somehow that suffering stays. So one thinks that the problem is work, and then one changes work, but then soon after, that same suffering comes back. Or no, maybe the problem is my partner, my husband, my wife, my child. You change your context, etc., etc., and after a while, it comes back. That's suffering. So it's very important to create the inner foundation to be able to sustain a state of peace and happiness, which is not obvious. It's not enough to just have a healthy lifestyle or have a path of awareness or generate positive emotions. This is extremely important, all of this. But to be able to to move from an intellectual process to a deep experience, one needs to create the causes. If we take the metaphor, it's a very a material metaphor. It's like saying, I can learn everything about managing funds, but I need to have them to be able to manage them. I can be an expert in how funds are managed and how to grow my portfolio and here and there and how to do this to not lose money and I need to spend them like this, etc., etc. But to be able to do all that, I need to have accumulated over time wealth that allows me to have something to manage. It's like saying, if I had a lot of money, I would spend them like this. But I need to have them to spend them. And similarly, if I personally had a lot of merits, how would I spend that virtuous energy? By generating a deep state of peace and satisfaction. I would direct that energy towards something that is going to generate peace on a mid and long term way, not just for moments of pleasure, but thinking more long term. So when we do something positively, when we do something positive, we recite dedications to be able to dedicate that action towards liberation, enlightenment. Through this positive action, can I develop myself and also take away my negativities. So just to conclude, in our daily life, it's very important to know how to do positive actions. And I see that often we're not used to it. And I realized this once when someone dies, something very important is that when someone dies, someone close to us or far from us, but let's say someone close to us dies, very often there's this feeling of powerlessness. Someone close to me died and I can't do anything. It's happened and it's over. Instead, there are many things that we can do to sustain that person even after death. And among those things, one of the most important things is to generate virtuous actions dedicated to that person. Because if I have sadness, if I have a strong feeling that comes because that person has passed away, then, remember that sadness or anger, generates a very strong energy. And if we're able to direct that, then we can direct it in many different ways. And one way is that I direct that energy to do virtuous actions dedicated to that person, the person, that animal, that being. And so I dedicate that action. And given that I'm doing that virtuous action, thanks to that being who has left us, that strength that comes is connected to that person. So part of that positive energy goes directly to that person, no matter where he or she is. It's like saying, "I'm doing this thanks to you." So it's also, so you are also part of these positive merits. You encouraged me to do this, even if you didn't know. You're connected to this action. So something that's very important when someone passes away or when someone is sick or when there's a difficult situation, that we should generate virtuous activities even in this moment of pandemic, something that's very important, which unfortunately I just do not see because it's just missing in our culture, is when there's a problem, when there's a sickness, when there's a conflict, or something difficult, it should be faced directly. So it's good to look for the best, the best treatment and the vaccines, and keep our distance and wear our masks. These are all these gross level solutions. But at the same time, we should generate virtuous, positive actions, and dedicated to the end of this pandemic, dedicated to a sick person. I mean, we have someone who's sick. What can I do for this person? I can pray. That's great. But beyond that, we should do virtuous actions dedicated to that person. That's a way to sustain and help that person. So when there's a difficult situation, whether it's an economic or health or human relations, regardless of the context, one thing that we can do is dedicate our positive merits specifically to that person or situation. If we're able to do this if we're able to do this in our daily lives, then we'll really be able to do it when more easily when someone has passed. I've told family members, I've told family members about this, and but it's even maybe they understand the logic, but often people don't know where to start or what to do to actually dedicate our positive actions towards to someone. Instead, it's really important to have this habit. Even in the sadhanas, for example, different visualizations. This comes about through visualization. Because let's remember that an action has different levels. There's a physical level, verbal, and there's also the mental level. When I generate an intention, I am doing an action. And I'm familiarizing my mind with that. Okay, of course, the physical action is also important. It's not enough just to think about it. We need to interact with the world. But in the practices, for example, when we visualize, if we visualize something very positive, like very quickly, if you visualize that which represents everything sacred and pure, or an image of Guru Buddha that comes to our heart, and from our heart, light rays and nectars go to all beings to eliminate all their sufferings and bringing them a state of joy. And if we go into details, these rays of light, they transform into everything that these beings need, So medicine for those who are sick, or company for those who are lonely, etc., all the way up to spiritual sustenance for them to reach enlightenment. If we can do this mentally through visualization by generating this positive energy, then this is something that we should do daily. We should familiarize ourselves with this daily. And there are 1,000 different ways that we can do, even that are easier, more simple. In these days, it's a little different. But if we go to the supermarket, or we go to buy bread, or we take a taxi, or we meet someone at work, or so we interact when we interact with others. we should interact with respect and gratitude. With awareness, try to do something for others, no matter how small. I mean, this is already so much. So, even for example, when someone tries to face one's own aggressive behaviors or anger, I'm not just managing my anger because it's harmful to me, but also because it's so harmful to others too, and I don't want to hurt others. So if I keep myself from speaking violently, if I'm doing it not just because I know it's harmful to me, but because it'd be hurtful to someone else, then that's another way of generating positive energy. So often it's just a question of awareness in our own actions. So last week we talked about the importance of taking commitments weekly, to say, like, this week I want to familiarize myself with this. And every day we remember that. So with the preciousness of this life or impermanence, etc. And one very important point is to have awareness, the awareness to say, I need to generate positive energy, these so-called merits. In Tibetan, the word is sonam, or punya in Sanskrit, generate actions of body, speech, and mind that generate this positive energy. So, and with this, without having attachment to the result, it's not because we're there counting up all of the positive actions so that we can then get something. Or no, it's the awareness of how important it is to how important it is to act positively, because if I, it's being coherent. I need to act according to what I want. If I want a state of peace and joy, etc., if I don't want to suffer, which is at the basis of what we want, of our attractions and our aversions, then I need to act accordingly. What I want for myself. Act in a way that is going to generate joy and avoid suffering in someone else. And so that will create the causes for me to be able to do so. It's something important to remember, is that this relationship between cause and a result, most of the time we're not able to see the result as we're doing the action, so we shouldn't be attached to the result. We should act with awareness that we're doing the best for ourselves and for others without being attached to the result. Because otherwise, after a while, we start judging our own actions. Okay, this isn't working. This isn't good because it didn't work. Instead, we need to observe our motivation, make sure that it's based on love and compassion, and then there are other manifestations like generosity, etc. But we observe well our motivation and act accordingly with awareness. This is something very important along our path. Another part we will talk about another day is about trying to avoid, how to redirect our negative conditionings, the so-called purification. So we need to see what our negative conditionings are and how we can try to avoid them. But one thing at a time. In this moment, the important moment is this concept of generating, accumulating causes to then be able to be well with ourselves and with others. So now we'll make our dedications.
Dedicare oggi per una nostra amica della Sangha che si chiamava Maria, che vive in Svizzera, che ha lasciato il corpo più o meno un paio di ore fa. Ok? Jetsun lame kutse rapten chi namkar chinle chokchur ge padang losan tempe drume sasum ki drove munsel tatu ne gyur chi kewa kundu yanda lamadang Dralme cheki pela long che ching Sadan lamge yende rabzone Dorje change kopang nyur tobe sho Chancho semcho rimboche Make panama ke gyurchi Kepa nyampar me payang Kongne konto pelwar shon Nimo dele tsendele Nime kuyan delek shin Ninten takto delek pe Koncho sumke jingilo Koncho sumke ngodrubotsol Concho sumke trascisho. All'alba o al tramonto, di notte o durante il giorno, possano i tre gioielli concederci le loro benedizioni, possano aiutarci ad ottenere tutte le realizzazioni e cospargere il sentiero della nostra vita con molti segni di buon auspicio. Buona giornata a tutti, grazie.